What is up, Doom Patrol fans? We are back with Season 2, and welcome to my very first review for the season, because the first 3 episodes of Season 2 dropped today, so I figured might as well just do all 3 episodes in one video. So I'm going to break it down by each episode, and then I'll take it by character and storyline and everything, just so we can go over, the main stuff that happened in each episode, and really the big reveals, and I'll get into my thoughts and theories on everything that could happen in the future of this season. So the first episode was called Fun Size Patrol, because, of course, the Doom Patrol is still, tiny. They're still miniatures. And one really interesting character that we got to see in this episode, the one character who's actually regular size, is Larry. So his negative spirit is definitely speaking to him in different ways, and has actually been alerting him, or showing him memories of how he was with his son, Gary. And well, let's just say that he wasn't really that good of a father. But then, turns out his son is dead now, because, he's older now, and he actually killed himself because of the pain that he went through in his childhood, because he just wanted his father to be as proud of him and his mother as he was of his father. So he never got that, so then he took his own life. And then in the next episode, we see that Larry actually goes to his funeral and everything, but I'll get into that more when we jump into the second episode. But another really cool character that I was glad to see more of in this season is Jane. So in this season, she's doing drugs, and she's also having a lot of problems with the underground. So all her different personalities in the underground basically don't like how she's running their lives. So they keep telling her, it's time for a change, she needs to move on. They want her to get away from the Doom Patrol and go live her own life, but she just can't do it because, they're her family. But Rita, I think, was honestly one of my favorite characters in this episode, because now she wants to be a superhero. She wants to learn how to use her powers, so that's why she's getting trained by Vic, because he's an actual superhero. And he actually insults her and gets her angry, and then that's what makes her able to use her powers. So when she gets angry, she's really able to harness that power and stretch out her limbs. But she just has to figure out how to, use her powers without getting insulted. But then when we see her test out her powers for that first time after Vic insults her, she almost gets stretched over to the statue but doesn't quite make it. But then by the end of the episode, when she does reach full size, when everybody gets back to normal size, she is able to fully reach over to the statue. So she's definitely growing with her powers, and she's starting to figure out how to use them. And then that continues on in the other episodes of this 3-part thing. But like I mentioned, Vic has been training her, but throughout this training, he's also been going through a lot of PTSD. He's still having nightmares about Mr. Nobody, and he still has that guilt from what happened with him punching his father because of everything that Mr. Nobody did to him. So he's having some tough times there. He keeps getting those flashback memories going through his head of him just punching his father repeatedly until he was out, and it's just hard to watch, seeing the pain that he goes through in this. But speaking of pain, that's something that Cliff knows all about. And in this episode, we don't really get much from Cliff, but we do see him have a few flashbacks to actually before his daughter was born, and even before he was married to his wife. And there was this thing about he didn't want his father to come to his wedding, because his father and his mother didn't get along, so one of them had to not go. I just wanted to throw this in there because it might mean something later on in the season, but I don't really know. But other than that, he didn't really have anything else to do in the episode. He had a little bit of time with Dorothy, but other than that, not really much. But the 2 main characters of this episode were actually Dorothy and the chief. So the chief, he had to figure out a way to get everybody back to normal size, because they can't stay miniature forever, because they just can't live their lives like that. So that is where Willoughby Kipling comes into the situation, because he has the magic to be able to bring them back to regular size. But of course he wants something in return, because, he's just a jerk. So Niles gives him this necklace thing that he's been wearing forever, basically. And it has like this black stone on it. And then we find out in the second episode what that's about, and that's actually keeping him alive. But at this time we didn't know that. So another really interesting thing that I actually have a theory about is that how at the end of the episode we see Niles tell Dorothy that he's not going anywhere and that he'll always be there for her. But I have a feeling that he won't. Like, I actually theorize that he may die in the season, because we know that he is growing older, because this whole time he's been basically immortal and he hasn't been aging, even though he's 139 years old. But I have a feeling they'll be able to fix that and fix the immortality thing, and he won't die from old age. But maybe he'll sacrifice himself to save Dorothy, because his whole goal is just to be able to protect Dorothy. So maybe he'll sacrifice himself just to protect her, and really he'll do whatever he can to keep her out of danger. Now, like I said, Dorothy is basically the main character of this episode, because it's introducing us to this character. I mean, it's telling us who this character is and showing us how cool she is, and she's actually really interesting. So we start off the episode, actually the first scene of the season actually, is with Dorothy. So she's being tortured and abused at this circus thing, or like a freak show, and basically the Candlemaker, who we don't see on screen yet, but as far as we know, she's just one of her imaginary friends, but he's actually secretly the main villain of the season. But he just keeps telling her, make a wish, okay. But then her saber wolfadier, which is totally what I'm calling it from now on. I mean, because out of all her imaginary friends that we've seen so far, they all have names except for that one. I don't think she said what that one's name is, but I'm just calling it a saber wolfadier because, it's got the saber-toothed teeth, though it looks like a giant wolf, and it's got the deer antlers and everything. So I'm officially calling it the saber wolfadier, so feel free to call it that as well, because, it's a great name. But that thing basically kills everyone at the circus or freak show. So when Dorothy gets out of her cage thing, there's just dead bodies all over the place. That creepy, freaky, dirty ringmaster, his head's just not even attached to his body anymore. So it's definitely a gruesome scene there, and lots of carnage that has gone on. But then we also find out some more information about Dorothy and her powers in this episode when it comes to her imaginary friends. So they come out when she's feeling specific feelings. So when she's happy, sad, angry, scared. And those are the moments where we see them come out in this episode, are when she feels those big emotions. And we actually do get one shot in this episode of all of these friends together. Of course, the saber wolfadier, the tarantula, which is actually named Herschel, and a glowy eye lady with a mirror face, and her name is Darling. So it's really interesting, but throughout the whole episode, the Candlemaker, you just hear his voice talking to her, and he keeps just saying, make wish. No, I'm not going to make a wish. And then she keeps telling him, no, I'm not going to make a wish. Not now, but maybe later, someday. So I'm just hoping that day doesn't come too soon, because what she doesn't know is that he's actually a villain, and he's, trying to take her over and, murder everyone, basically. So that's basically what happened in the first episode. So basically a lot of setup for the future episodes of the season, but I still really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed everything that we had in this episode. Now moving on to episode 2 of Doom Patrol Season 2, and this episode was titled Time Patrol, and no, not Time, Tyme, and if you watched the episode, which I assume you have, if you're this far in the review, I assume you've seen the episode, because, been talking about all the spoilers at this point, but you know why it's spelt that way. But once again, I'm going over each different character, starting off this time with Vic. So Vic, his journey in this season really kicks off in this episode. So he goes to a support group because, like I said, he has PTSD, and that is where he meets Roni Evers, which is actually a character from the comics, except this is a gender-bent version, and she's going to be his love interest for this season. And they really hit it off in this episode. You know, they talk about all their experiences, and, you know, they say, like, all right, we'll see you at the next meeting and stuff like that. But then that storyline really gets going in the next episode as well. Like, a lot happens in the next episode with those two characters and their relationship there. But then the main part of this episode is an adventure that was actually set up by the chief. So, like I said, the chief is dying because he doesn't have that necklace thing anymore that was keeping him alive. So now he's dying of old age because, you know, he's 139 years old. So what they need is time. And there's this freaky dude named Dr. Time who has this little purple thingy in his helmet forehead thing that could basically cure the chief and keep him immortal. So Rita, Cliff, and Jane, they go out on a mission to go get this helmet that has the purple thing in it. So they go to Dr. Time's time capsule, and it's definitely not what they expect, because it turns out it's actually like a roller disco thing that's going on there. So everybody's on roller skates, everybody's dancing to the disco music, and then they keep playing the same exact song over and over again, just bad girl. Sorry about that. But yeah, they just keep playing that same song over again. But honestly, I'm not complaining, because, I mean, good song. But, you know, Cliff doesn't like it. He thinks it gets real annoying. But Rita really takes advantage of her powers in this episode, and she actually starts to use them for good, as she wants to, because she wants to become a hero. So I'm glad that she's kind of starting to figure out how to use those powers, because when she uses them, she goes to grab the helmet off of Dr. Time, but turns out it's not a helmet, that's actually his head. So when she rips it off, his whole brain just slides across the floor, because, I mean, she just ripped his head off. But then everything goes crazy, and things just don't really go as planned. So then Rita actually turns back time with Dr. Time's clock face, because his face is a clock, so she, like, turns the clock hands backwards and then turns back time. So now Dr. Time is alive again, and then he basically banishes them and sends them back to the Doom Manor. And that's basically where their mission ends, because, well, I mean, it's not like they can go back. But now Rita is really mad at Niles as well, because in the first episode, you were really seeing the aftermath of last season, where everybody found out that what happened to them is because of Niles, because he was, you know, trying to become immortal and stuff. And at first, it was pretty much just Jane and Cliff that were super pissed off about this. But now, Rita's actually mad about it as well, because she's gone through so much for this guy. She's stood up for him, but still, it's not going well, especially not for her. And then we also see a few scenes here with Jane and the Underground, and we see some flashbacks here. And then we get a couple mentions about Miranda, who was one of the primaries, I think the second primary, but apparently she was powerful, so maybe she was like the most powerful personality until she, you know, jumped down the well. But I'm not sure what they're setting up here, but we do get some more Underground stuff in the third episode, but there's no mention of Miranda there, so I'm really interested to see how this continues in the season with Miranda and how important she really is for this storyline. Now, finally, Larry. Now, like I said, he goes to his son's funeral in this episode, Gary, which I actually speculated in my trailer breakdown, because when I saw him in that suit, I thought that, oh, maybe he's going to someone's funeral, and it was. It's just his son, so I didn't figure that out from the trailer. But he goes to his son's funeral. And his other son, Paul Trainer, actually recognizes his voice and realizes, oh my god, my father is alive. So this is a really crazy moment here. But then he tells them to stop by the house later because they're having basically like an after party type thing, except it's not really a party because, they're celebrating a guy that died. But Larry does show up. He just doesn't actually go in the house because the negative spirit kind of like gives him a signal that there's some kind of importance in the barn. So he actually goes in the barn and then he sees this shrine for himself and realizes that Gary actually knew that he was alive this whole time, or at least thought he was, and was trying to find proof so that he could convince everybody else that Larry was alive as well. But then after this, I feel like Larry really has closure now. So he leaves the house. He just starts walking on his way, starting off on this new path. But then all of a sudden, these butterflies swarm all over him. And this basically sets up and leads directly into the third episode, because now we have the Divine Red Jack, who's the main villain of the third episode. And Larry has now been kidnapped by him. And I think the third episode was probably the best because it had the most happening in it, and it really followed up on what was set up in the first two episodes. So for the third episode, it was called Pain Patrol, and I'm going to start off by talking about Cliff. So in this episode, Cliff is still trying to distance himself from the chief. He's still upset with him. So he's trying to get in touch with his daughter. He wants to be in his daughter's life. So he goes to her house with the stuffed giraffe, of course, and tells her everything, but of course she thinks he's crazy. I mean, this robot dude shows up at your house and then he's like, hey, I'm your father. You thought I was dead for 30 years, but guess what? I'm alive. Like, no, you just wouldn't believe that. He just seems like some crazy guy. So she kicks him out and, of course, calls the police. And then later he leaves because he realizes, like, there's no way he can be in her life anymore. Like, he lost that chance because of the chief. So now he's even more mad at the chief because he thought he had a chance, but he really doesn't. Now, Jane was also with Cliff on this journey, except she was asleep on the bus the whole time. But what we didn't know is that she was actually in the underground while she was sleeping there. And she was basically getting this intervention from her other personalities. And they were basically telling her, like, it's time to make a change. And then by the end of the episode, we see that she is now in a cage and she's been locked up. So I'm interested to see how this is going to continue in the season, because in the trailer, or at least one of them, we saw that Jane was like hurting or like trapping Dorothy in a cage or something. So maybe one of Jane's other personalities is going to take over as the new primary while Jane is locked up in that cage, and then they will try and kill Dorothy and the rest of the Doom Patrol. So then when Jane becomes the primary again, she won't have that other family to distract her from her main goal. So I have a feeling that's probably what they're going to be doing there. But yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting idea. And I'm excited to see where this goes in the rest of the season, because in the first season, I actually honestly got kind of bored with the whole underground stuff. Because there was just so much of it, and there was like 3 or 4 episodes specifically about that. But as long as they dial it back a little bit in this season, I like the idea. Because, I mean, she's an interesting character. She's got 64 different personalities, with each having their own different powers and stuff. So I'm still very much excited to see where this goes in Season 2. Now, like I mentioned in when I was talking about the last episode, Vic, he and Roni's relationship is really developing in this episode, and they really, become one, basically, because, like, at first, Vic is hesitant because she, like, starts taking off his shirt, but then he's like, no, because I'm a robot, and you can't see my parts. But then she takes off her shirt and clothes, and then she's like, look at my scars. And then Vic realizes, like, she and I are the same. Like, these scars don't define us. They don't make us any different. We're still human beings, and this doesn't make anything different, and I should be all right with these robot parts that I have, because it's what makes me me. So that's basically the little lesson that he learned there. And so then they have sex. So if you learn a lesson like that, that's what you got to know, people. If you every time you learn a life lesson, you may get sex out of it. So I mean, might as well start learning now. But she actually thinks he's like all the other guys, so she's like, oh, I'll just sleep with him once and then I'll move on to some other guy. But he's actually taken an interest in her, and then he sets up another date for the next night, and he plans to have dinner with her again, but she doesn't show up. Instead, she just sends him a couple emails basically explaining everything, so we don't really see what that is, though. She pretty much just says in the email that from what we saw, like, this is something that you should know now or something. So I don't really know what's going on there. Maybe it'll explain how she got her scars or something. But I mean, their relationship is definitely going to continue from here. It's not like they're ending it there. But at the end of the episode, Vic does walk off, and I don't know, but I'm excited to see where this story continues. Now, finally, in this third episode, we of course have the main storyline going on here, which was the continuation of episode 2's cliffhanger with Larry getting kidnapped by the divine Red Jack. And, well, Niles gets an invitation from the Red Jack because we see a flashback to his childhood where he actually met the Red Jack, who has been responsible for many murders in history, and he was actually Jack the Ripper, along with many other mysterious murders. So yeah, he's behind all that stuff, and Niles had an encounter with him, so now he's been invited to dinner with him. And then, of course, Rita tags along because they want to go rescue Larry. But then when they first get there to his, like, palace mansion thing, of course they get separated. But Rita goes off and she actually ends up finding Larry and saves him. But in the process, she gets, like, well, actually, both of them, they get these, like, butterfly wings that just, like, sprout out of their back. And they're, like, covered in blood and stuff. And it was, like, really gross and weird, but yeah, I don't even know, but it was weird. But then she ends up saving him as he's having, like, these flashbacks of more memories of how he and her met and stuff. And then we get a nice encounter at the end of the episode when they're both safe back at the mansion, how their relationship has grown since then, and how they're kind of like the core friendship of the house. Like, they'll always be friends, and they'll always be the main two basically there, because they were the first two that were at Doom Manor that became, subjects of Niles Calder. Now, as for Niles himself, he was actually being tortured by Red Jack, and, he also gets the butterfly wings coming out of his back, and, that is until he actually ends up killing and stabbing the Red Jack, and then, of course it's disappointing to see that the Red Jack is dead, because that means we won't see him return in the future. But I have to admit, it was really cool seeing how he died, because when he got stabbed and he died, it was like he just turned into a butterfly poof. Like, he turned into a whole bunch of butterflies and then just went poof. So that was really cool. And then at the very end of the episode, everybody else is safe. Everybody is safe, and they're now back at the Doom Manor, except for Danny the Brick, because earlier in the episode and throughout the episode, we saw that Dorothy was playing hide and seek with her imaginary friends, but while she was carrying around Danny the Brick, she got scared and dropped it. So, well, now Danny is in two pieces, so I don't know what that means, because, Danny was going to grow back into a full street, but now not only is Danny half a street and just like one brick, now it's like half a brick. So I don't know how Danny's gonna come back from this. I don't know if Danny can, because even Niles couldn't figure out how to fix them. So I don't know how this is gonna continue on in the story, but I'm definitely excited to see where it goes from here in season 2 of Doom Patrol. But anyways, guys, what did you think about these first 3 episodes of Doom Patrol Season 2? I really enjoyed them, and I'm excited to see where this journey takes us in Season 2. So, if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, let me know all your thoughts and theories down in the comments below, and hit the subscribe button so I can keep you up to date on everything that goes on in the DC life.